Israel has now made their exodus from Mitzrayim or Egypt. Now, beginning in Exodus chapter 16 and verse 4, the Bible states, Then said Yahweh unto Moshe, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them whether they will walk in my law or no. And it shall come to pass that on the 6th day they shall prepare that which they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. Again, this is the first mention of Shabbat since its introduction in Bereshit or Genesis. This here, because he is introducing this particular time period and this observance to his people, would be an opportune time for the Most High to simply state in identifying which day is the 7th day to follow the phases of the moon. The question we have to ask ourselves, especially if you are a lunar Sabbatarian, why didn't he do that? Why does he use the raining of bread from heaven and the gathering of a double portion on the 6th day to indicate that the day following would be Shabbat, opposed to just simply following the phases of the moon? Think about it. Let's continue. Let's go down to verse 22. And it came to pass that on the 6th day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for one man. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moshe. And he said unto them, This is that which Yahweh has said. Tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto Yahweh. So right there, he is now specifying the manner in which the Creator taught them how to observe Shabbat is by providing a double portion on the 6th day, had absolutely nothing to do with observing the phases of the moon. This is the simplicity of the word. But let's move on. Let's go to Exodus chapter 20 and verse 8. Let me get the board cleared up for our next word before I read. Now, remember, he states, the Shabbat, to keep it holy. Now, the word we're going to take a look at is the term translated as remember, which is zakar. That is number 2142 in your Strong's. Okay? Again, this is a primitive root which means to mark so as to be recognized, to remember. Also, by implication, and keep this in mind because we're going to look at this in another lesson we'll be doing later. To be male. And we'll explain that when we take a look at it closer in a later lesson. But now, when you mark something, what are you doing? So let's take a look at the parent word again. Now we have for this parent word the letter Kaf, which is the open palm. And in this context, being the open palm, what it simply means is it's just that, to open. Okay? So you have the Kaf, then you also have the head of man again. So now when you put these two ideas again, when you open the head, and the point being you mark something to keep it in mind or to remember it as something that you're doing with your brain or your mind. Okay? So that's where you get the idea of remembering from. So he says in his word that we are supposed to remember or to mark this particular time that he's referring to, Shabbat, so that we can maintain the sanctity or the holiness of this day. But think about it. Now when you get into the commandments, okay, we understand that Moshe, when he was atop of Mount Sinai and you had the nation before the mount, that the Most High actually spoke these words to Moshe in the people's hearing. But what's interesting is that when you get to the fourth commandment, very significant, very important, that it is the fourth commandment. He says, remember. Now, one of the things that we come to understand from the word as it pertains to Yahweh, Alahiym, is that there's foreknowledge of what is going to take place. That's where prophecy comes from. Knowing aforetime the events or the steps that humanity is going to take. So when he gave this fourth commandment, he said, remember, knowing that there will be some force, some presence who would think to change these particular times. So let's continue. Exodus chapter 20 and verse 9. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Shabbat of Yahweh Alahiym. Okay, your mighty one. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your manservant or your maidservant or your cattle or your stranger that is within your gates. Now, why 6 days of work followed by a day of rest? He continues in verse 11. For in 6 days Yahweh made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Real simple, brothers and sisters.